Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. What exactly is the hold-up to announce the Luiz Ortiz and Deontay Wilder rematch date? Also, the venue, where is it going to be? Deontay Wilder announced that he would be rematching Ortiz, and that announcement was made all the way back in May. 2.5 months ago, and still no date, no site. And he said at the time, with the date and site to be announced shortly. So 2.5 months is certainly not shortly, and it does make me wonder what is going on here. And the thing that springs to mind for me, is Deontay Wilder injured? Has he been injured? Is he rehabbing some form of injury? And I think there is actually some evidence, potentially, that this could actually be the case, because some of what's been happening does mirror some of the circumstances that have gone on in the past couple of years. And what I mean by that was, back in 2017, you might recall Deontay Wilder knocked out Gerald Washington. And after that, for about 3-4 months-ish, it was something like that, he was actually relatively quiet. There was talk about a Berman-Stavern rematch because he was the mandatory challenger. But Wilder, for the most part, was relatively quiet and pretty circumspect on social media. A lot of people were wondering what was going to be happening with that fight. And it later emerged from Deontay Wilder himself. During that time, he had been rehabbing a hand injury, but he didn't say anything. Obviously, that came out later after the period of silence. And we know from 2018, ahead of his fight with Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder actually injured his arm, broke his arm according to Wilder, some sort of fracture that he sustained in sparring. He said he punched someone to the body and their elbow happened to be there, and that's how he broke it. Basically punching the guy's elbow, and it caused a fracture in his own right arm. And actually, just with that, prospect Christian Thun, he's come out on social media saying that he was the one that he injured himself against Deontay Wilder. And I just want to talk about this for a second, because the timing and some of what he's saying here doesn't quite stack up with what was said in public. Because he says, see here on screen, this was an Instagram story from about a week or so ago. Sparring with Wilder. In the first round we sparred for the Fury fight, I got a cut above my eye and he broke his right hand on my elbow. His fight was postponed for 6 weeks. And just on that timeline, because Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, they announced their fight in August 2018 after Fury fought Pianeta. They were in the ring together, they announced that they were going to be fighting. But clearly Wilder knew that that fight was coming well ahead of that being announced. And he'd actually said publicly in stories, that had been reported, that he injured his right arm from sparring, and obviously it was against Christian Thun, 12 weeks ahead of training camp starting. So they started their training camp effectively, I think it was in October. So you minus that out. But so he knew well ahead that he was going to be fighting Tyson Fury well before rumors started to bubble up. But it's quite interesting because Thun says here it was postponed by 6 weeks. And you may recall, Frank Warren, when they announced that fight in 2018, he said, look, we'll be announcing the date and the venue within about a week or so. And then it ended up being this big delay of just over a month, and people were asking, well, what is going on here? You said you're going to be fighting, and it just went silent. And I actually think some of that injury, which we know now happened, that Wilder had previously injured himself, I think some of the delay was down to the injury and that he needed the extra time to rehab his arm, that he needed to have more time to let it heal. And we do know that in that training camp ahead of the Fury fight, he barely threw that right hand. That was basically in his own words. Even a sparring partner, Junior Farr, who I spoke to the end of 2018, said after this news emerged about this, broken arm, all that sort of stuff, he said Deontay Wilder didn't throw many right hands, and we know why. And I think some of the reason that there was that delay was the injury. So Thun and Wilder's version of events, loosely marry up, maybe the time not so much, but it does indicate Deontay Wilder knew he was going to be facing Fury well ahead of what we did. But also, there was that time difference that just happened to slip by, and it was because of injury. And I think we're looking at basically a similar situation. And you may have actually forgotten, in that fight with Dominic Breazeale, Deontay Wilder injured his left arm. He stated immediately after the fight that his left arm went numb during the fight. So apparently he injured it to some extent, but that kind of just sort of, washed away, got forgotten. Never really had any update on what happened. And that is actually, something that Deontay Wilder, I think we've seen a bit of a history of doing. He doesn't talk about some of these injuries until well after the fact. The fact that he only recently admitted he'd had 7 surgeries on his right arm, that was certainly big news to some extent because people were aware of some of the surgeries, but not the extent of the injury history. So I'm wondering, is some of what's going on right now, based on some of what I'm just saying with the history and some of the quietness that's happening right now, is Deontay Wilder actually carrying an injury or had been carrying an injury, been rehabbing it, and effectively that's been delaying this announcement for a Luiz Ortiz and Deontay Wilder fight? And I think there potentially is some evidence to support it. The last 2 years effectively line up with what's happening now, with the period of quietness to some extent. Wilder has said just in recent days that there's still a few details to be worked out. That was effectively the language that everyone involved ahead of the Fury fight was saying. And we know that Wilder was still repairing his arm after injuring it. So I think he might be injured again. And this is one of these things with Wilder. He's, 33, soon to be 34. He's in the prime of his career right now, but he's extremely injury prone. So his durability, it's going to become an increasing concern the longer his career goes on, because obviously he's been having multiple injuries, especially on the right arm, in the course of his career. So it may be a case that this rematch, it's certainly going to happen, but he needs to get himself right before they can announce it. And they have been talking about November, but previously when this was first announced in terms of Wilder saying in May, there was speculation that it was going to be in September. And then that was sort of Tim Smith from PBC later came out and said, we're now looking at November. But who's to say it won't be in December? And if it does push out, I think that would certainly add weight to the theory that Deontay Wilder has been injured, has been rehabbing some form of injury, and is trying to get himself back into top physical condition. But just wanted to throw that out there because this delay, everyone's been asking, well, what's been happening? Where is this rematch? Should have been announced by now. Wilder back in May saying date in sight to be announced shortly, and it's been 2.5 months. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.